Welcome to Novel Ideas, Chats with Local Authors. I'm Carolyn Lach, and I'm here with Josh Brogadir.
It is great to be with you, Carol, and tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. It's been 2 years since we've had our show. We thought it'd be a good time to do a 2-year in review, so to speak. And we couldn't have all these authors sitting on these couches. They wouldn't fit, so instead, we are going to talk about them and some of their incredible work.
Okay, let's start with Christopher Golden. Christopher was here. Actually, his mom came with him, and it was just amazing. She told some fun stories of TV shows he used to watch as a kid. And the book we talked about was Dead Ringers, but Christopher is actually a New York Times bestseller several times over. And one thing that really resonated with me was when he was talking about this keynote speech he'd given to writers in Dallas, Texas, and it was titled, Writing for a Better World.
All right.
And it's just so amazing.
He's really terrific. Lives in Haverhill now, but he's a Framingham native. Here now is Christopher Golden.
The keynote I gave was called Writing for a Better World. And as I've gotten older, I felt like it's sort of incumbent upon us to try to bring more representation of different kinds of people into our fiction. And even if we can't know what other people's lives are, we can try to present them as people just like anybody else. And so we can try to at least respect other people's experiences. And so as I get older, I try to do more and more of being inclusive in the choice of characters, whether it be choice of their race or sexual preference or having a condition like Asperger's syndrome, or having disabled people, whatever it may be. I just feel like the more that we see, we spend so much time in our entertainment seeing people who are just like us, and that's a privilege that we have, and we don't think about the fact that that's what we're seeing.
So Moxie is an incredible character. Erin Dion really brings her to life. This is a middle grade theme, and that's a hard genre to write. A lot of authors can't just pick that one up.
Well, Erica does a really nice job because her characters just bring the stories on and take you into little mysteries. This particular story was about an art heist at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and it was just great.
Yeah.
But she's done a number of them, and Moxie and her friends find all sorts of trouble.
Moxie's funny. Erin is a terrific author, and Erica Ferencik is as well. Talk about going from one genre to another. The River at Night is the type of book that I sometimes think about in terms of I'm walking through the woods, and all of a sudden I'm in the woods of Maine, and these incredible characters, 4 powerful women, and their pursuers, so to speak.
And it's an adventure of a lifetime. I mean, this one literally had me hanging on to the arm of the sofa as I was reading along, hoping that this raft wasn't going to tumble over. And she's just an amazing author, and her books are literally all over. Even there's an advertisement for one in the Tube in London.
Wow.
And so she's pretty incredible.
She's quite accomplished. She really is. One of the things I also love about her writing is she was talking about her research for doing it. First, she went up to live in the woods in Maine and to interact with some of the folks who are up there living in kind of off the grid. And she also went down to South America to do a similar thing for her upcoming one.
The rainforest in Peru. I
Yeah.
actually saw some of her slides.
Wow.
That's going to be a real chiller, I'll tell you.
She's really something. Here now is Erica Ferencik.
And I wanted to interview people who lived off the grid. So I didn't know anybody. So I called all the chambers of commerce right up through Millinocket and Caribou and all the way up there. And they said, well, these people don't want to be contacted. That's why they live off the grid, but then they said, well, maybe I know someone who knows someone. And so I was able to set up like 8 different interviews with all these people, and I ended up staying with a lot of them in various home-like situations, a yurt, a rehabbed bus, lots of strange cabins. One guy took me on a horse into the woods. That's the only way he would do it. His own horse. We rode for an hour. He made me sign a piece of paper saying I wouldn't say where he lived or his name or anything like that. And it was like old-fashioned carbon piece of paper. It was so weird. And then I get back on his horse and he takes me back to my car.
A well-known name is David Driscoll. People know him all over Massachusetts, and you know him personally. It was nice to have him on.
Yes, oh yes, he was our former Commissioner of Education. And this book is so neat because it was actually written as a history of education reform. And yet there is such a personal touch to it of how he came to be a teacher and how he ended up being a superintendent and all the things he did along the way. And it's just an amazing story, but it's a very human one.
And he's a recent guest of ours. He could talk for hours. He was sitting in this chair, and I felt like, you know, our shows are roughly a half hour, 25 minutes or so. We could have done a 2-hour show with David. He had stories to tell.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, he's interesting.
Well, let's move on to another author that we had on the show was Laura Woollett. And Laura undertook one of the toughest tasks in writing because this was a story about a true story about a tragedy, and yet she wrote it as a children's book. And to me, that takes such incredible talent.
The other thing is it's a nonfiction book, but there's a lot of unsolved mysteries involved. So it added to the intrigue for children and certainly for adults. I mean, I was piecing through that. She has some photographs in there, which really bring it all home, because a lot of people aren't familiar with the Big Top burning. It was in Connecticut, not right around here. So, but she's local.
Yeah, she lives in Framingham.
Yeah, she does.
And so here she is.
I wanted to find ways that kids could identify with what it was like at the time. To see how children were affected by the disaster was really important to me. Not only how children might have been injured in the disaster, but also how they survived and how they used their ingenuity to survive. And also how children helped in the aftermath in ways that we would shelter children today, but actually after the fire happened, children like the Boy Scouts ran messages between the Circus Fire grounds and the police station. They did all sorts of things to try to help each other. And I think that's a powerful message.
John David Ferrer is an author. He is an attorney, and he's a very interesting guy. And he's also bilingual, which we have a few different bilingual guests. This is his new, tell us about this. This is actually his newest book.
Right, this just came out. And his first book was actually talking about Puerto Rico and the Puerto Ricans when they went from New York and back and forth through a few generations.
SJU, JFK, yeah.
Right, and his books span several generations, and they're so historically correct. And this book just came out going between Spain, Barcelona, and Borinquen, and
Puerto Rico, sure.
Puerto Rico. And one of the interesting things about this is they survived 3 hurricanes in this book. And it just sort of grabbed me as I was reading this about what's going on there today.
Yeah, a lot of history in some of our guests. Another one here is so Pat Lavin and Laura Stagliola wrote this one. That's an interesting one, all about, of course, the old factory, the Denison Manufacturing Factory.
Yes, and it's really awesome. Fred Wallace, our town historian, did Pushing for Cushing and 2 books about George Gordon, a Civil War hero from Framingham. And I just think these books are so nice because they make you feel so much more a part of our city. It's really amazing.
Nice.
But one of our most amazing authors is this very prolific children's book author, Josh Funk. Do you want to say a few words about Josh?
There are many words to say about Josh Funk. He was an entertaining guest. He has so much energy and really is one of those guys who, works as a software engineer and yet has this second career now and is really, really gaining steam. He has 4 books coming out between May and I believe it's September. In 2018. But this is his classic, yes. Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast.
So let's hear from Josh Funk now.
Well, I write in rhyme a lot, not always, but I write in rhyme a lot, and it took a really long time to figure out how to write rhyme well. I'm still learning a lot, so I probably have room to improve. But so rhyme is something that I like, but a lot of people write in rhyme, and a lot of people write great rhyme. And another thing I try to do is I try to have fun and add humor. One of the most important things is I try to think about what I want to see illustrated. I am not a visual artist. I tell kids, in kindergarten, first grade, raise your hands if you like art. And, all of them raise their hands. By fifth grade, maybe half of them raise their hands. And I always tell them, keep working on your art because, I wish I could draw. Illustrator Brendan Kearney, he told me that he spent, there's a page in this book with a bean avalanche.
Yep,
and he told me he spent an entire week coloring in beans, a whole week. So if you work hard, someday it could be your job to color in beans because that is a real job. But yeah, so I think about things I want to see illustrated. I am not a visual artist, so I think I want to see what a pirate dinosaur looks like. I want to see pancakes and French toast running through the fridge. I want to see a boy and a dragon who are pen pals. And I try to make sure that whatever I'm drawing is something that I haven't seen before. I want it to be something that would entertain me. I know these are children's books. And most of the publishers, when you go and you look on the back, it'll say somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 or 5 to 8. But I always have in my head, I'm not a teacher, but I am a parent. And I read a lot of great books, and I read some that were just okay. And I want to make sure that the parents are entertained as well.
So in these 2 years, we've had many children's authors as our guest. Another one is Rene Cronoyer, and his stories are all about Sticky.
Right, this amazing little elf and his 2 little friends, and they're about friendship and about doing good deeds and helping people, and yet they're told in such a neat little way. He also has a little historical twist to his books, too.
Yeah, so more children's authors, novelists, and a whole lot more coming up right after the break.
Welcome back to Novel Ideas. I'm here with Josh Brogadir, and we're doing our 2-year review. It's kind of a celebration of all the wonderful authors that we've spoken about in the last 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years have gone fast, and Sandra Elaine Scott is one of our guests who really has such an incredible heart, doesn't she?
Yes, yes.
And it came through in her writing. 2 books specifically, The Magical Day is one that we have here, and Mañana starts today.
Yeah, and in Mañana, it's such an inspiration. I mean, it's literally pages of short little inspirations, and it's very, very nice. It's won an International Book Club Award and a few other things, and her Magical Day is just beautiful. It's about this little boy that goes on an adventure and discovers all these beautiful things about himself, that he can be brave and smart, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah, it sure is. Here's Sandra Elaine Scott.
That was one of my mother's favorite quotes. She loved to say that she lived with a bunch of mañana people, that anytime she wanted something done, you were like, yeah, we're getting to it, she's like, I live with a bunch of mañana people. And when I got into training and coaching, and especially coaching people on living the life of their dreams, one of the things that I found out was that most people were waiting. They were waiting on their mañanas. They're waiting for their children to grow older, waiting till they get a new job, till they make more money, till they find the right guy or girl in their life. Nothing was ever happening now. And it was like, whatever you're going to do, take action and do it now.
Warren Ross spoke to us about his wonderful picture books, and these are just whimsical. They're really, really wonderful. And Teapots and Assorted Things are just little poems that go along with these beautiful pictures.
Warren has such a nice way about him. He's a very soft, kind of quiet type person, and really loved it. And we had a lot of other children's authors that are certainly worth talking about. Well, just a few, just a sample. One is Anna Staniszewski, which she writes a lot of middle grade books, but this is one that she did, a picture book called Dogosaurus Rex. And
oh, her Dirt Diary books for middle school kids. I mean, you just feel their instant embarrassment.
Yep.
She's there.
Charles Beck is one author we had on, and he used to teach over at Framingham State. He does a lot of photography, and his books are just rich with photography, and he writes about all his adventures all around the world. And speaking of adventures, a book of adventures and a Christmas time book was The Last Shepherd and Tales of the 10th Ornament. It was really fun having Mark here, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. And Mark came with Paul Serafini, who wants to make this book into a movie. And I just think both of them were just such fascinating individuals. They were really fun to have.
Yeah, Mark Duffield, what a great person to have on. And next up is Ray Daniel. Ray lives in Framingham. He writes about Tucker, who is a hacker, essentially, and a really rich character and quirky and interesting.
Yes, well, he's also another one who was a computer programmer as one of our authors. And the book we talked, all of his books are Boston-based mysteries. Yeah. And they are so true to down to the street and where the firehouse is located and everything. They're fun to read.
I'm lucky enough to be narrating an audiobook for him called Terminated. That'll be really fun. That comes out at some point in the next couple months. But it was really great having him on, and here's Ray Daniel.
Well, you know, in my case, I am an engineer. I came from I'm in an industry that's had a lot of crime, actually. The electronic design automation business, though sleepy and unknown, has literally had a CEO who was in prison trying to hire a guy to kill the judge, has had software stolen. If you saw the movie or read the book, The Big Short, the character in those stories, the guy who was somewhat on the spectrum, he made big money early on buying shares in this company that stole another company's software, and had, because they were all arrested and whatnot, the stock had hit rock bottom, and he figured, well, it can't go any lower, and he bought in then. Right. And looking at that, I'm like, well, there could be a lot of crime in tech. That would be fun. And so that's how Tucker was born, as an engineer. And he was originally actually in my actual field, but the feedback from the agents early on was like, character in the people don't want to read about a really obscure part of the technical world. So that's how he shifted into being a security software consultant, because everyone understands hacking, or at least viscerally understands hacking and has heard of it.
Yeah. Deborah Sosin's another person whose books reflect the real world she lives in. She's actually a therapist, and she wrote this book of Charlotte and the Quiet Place, and she kind of teaches kids to take deep breaths and to meditate. And it's just such a beautiful little story.
Certainly.
It's really sort of warmed my heart. I wanted to.
I love the pictures in this. At one point you see Charlotte and her dog, and they're sort of chasing in a park, but then they stop for a moment to listen. This is about not being loud. This is about being quiet, and that's really something else. But there is a loud book on our list, and I think it's certainly worth talking about. Not just a loud book, but with all due respect to Carrie Johnson, a bit of a loud woman in terms of she has a lot to say, and she's got a great sense of humor.
Oh, she's absolutely amazing. And I think one of the reasons she wrote this book, and she has a sequel to it called Cold Flash, but actually she wrote this book because there were so many heroes that were these young little detectives that supposedly knew it all and figured out everything. And so this is a middle-aged detective in Philadelphia, and the whole setting, you're there, and she runs from Massachusetts to Philadelphia. But the underlying piece of all her mysteries and where she drags you to and everything is family, and how family would do anything for each other.
She did a great job with the police work, too. She did a great job really making it a very believable story of police work and making sure that they're investigating the crime in a very authentic way.
Yeah, she very much did.
Yeah.
And so, and here's Carrie Johnson.
Writing wasn't, that big a deal for me. I really never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I do remember for English, I had to write a story, and like you do for English class. And my story was the terror of my childhood. And I remember the teacher saying that it should be on the required reading list. Okay, and it was about a black flagpole that I used to always run into when we would come out of the house, we'd jump over the hedges and, play in the street. And there was a black flagpole before you got to the hedges. And I always ran into it, always. And so that was my story. And while I enjoyed it, I think I loved to read. I read everything, all the Nancy Drew mysteries. Do you remember Nancy Drew?
Yes.
That was like from the beginning to the end, Nancy Drew mysteries all the time. So I loved reading. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing. I read all those books when I was younger.
Francisco Stork was another one of our guests, and this book is called Disappeared, and he writes a lot of what he knows, which is, of course, one of the writer's hallmark. This is about La Frontera, the border, of course, crossing from Mexico into Texas, and yet he doesn't write gratuitous violence. I thought that was really interesting.
And well, all of his books too, when you think about the border and all of the things going on today between Mexico and Texas, he talks about, well, you go to El Paso to get a haircut and come back.
Right.
And he's also he's another one of our attorneys, as you talk, but he was just a fascinating person, and his characters are so amazing. They just are three-dimensional, and you just totally relate to them, and it's wonderful.
It's true. And Judy Cadorette is another one. This one, for me, it was a personal favorite. It really touched me in a way. Hearing about her daughter, Michelle, her only child, this one broke my heart. I mean, I was crying during this book. It's so sweet. And
Judy's purpose for writing this book was so that her daughter's memory would stay alive, and that because she died of a very rare form of cancer, that it would help to bring attention to this and get more research done for it. And she does fundraisers for it and everything else, but it's just such a beautiful legacy. Live with courage, lead with hope. And here's Judy Cadorette.
There were lots of stories that Michelle had written and shared with me, and email was wonderful because when she gave some speeches, graduation speeches and so forth, she would email them to me, and I, of course, saved them all. And some funny stories that actually took place one of them took place at a very serious moment at Mass General, and she made it very funny. And it's called The Night of the Catheter, so you might imagine. And another one about pillows. And then some poignant stories about a roommate that she had who passed away shortly after she left the hospital. A roommate at the hospital that she'd had. And friends and family contributed stories, and my husband and I had stories to tell. And it all just started happening, so.
finally tonight, I'd be remiss if we didn't say another author who I've interviewed myself, who's sitting right next to me, Carol Lynn Lach. Heroines of the Kitchen Table was her first, and this was terrific. This is how it all got started.
Yes.
And you, of course, have Gym Class Klutz in your hand.
This was a very heavy topic in Heroines of the Kitchen Table, talking about the time in Europe before World War II and during World War II, and people who survived this. And so I needed something really fun to write about after that. And so I based this book on my high school years, entitled Gym Class Klutz, and it's been fun.
Terrific. And it has been fun, 2 years, and it's been great. And thanks to all of you who are watching at home. We appreciate it so much. And the staff here at Access Framingham, we certainly couldn't do it without you. Shavarsh, you know you're listening. Thank you so much for all your hard work and your editing, and it's been great.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.